Sean here, BaseMint Comics. It is the weekend, the tea is made, and I know it has been a very long time due to circumstances outside of my control when it came to comic book room construction. But I'm back for another Corner Box Classics. You know what? I know there's a couple folks out there who probably just watch Corner Box Classics because they're old timers and they're like, I don't want to hear your hot takes on new books. Nobody cares about new books. I'm only here for the stuff from 1982. So, had some water damage to the basement. That problem is fixed. And then got a new floor. So had to take everything down, everything out, and here's a 45-second time lapse of what happened. All right, so if you are a Wednesday watcher, I'm sorry that you had to sit through that again, or maybe you liked the transformation. I don't know. Corner Box Classics, if you are new, I have been for the past few years reading all of my comic books in release date order from 1961 to the present. I started this channel almost a year ago. I think it'll be a year in August. And I decided that I would pull Corner Box Classics into the show because it meant that I didn't have to, like, I'm sure there are some channels out there that are like, I got to think of something for content. And I was like, I'll just read my comics. That's what I'm going to do. That's all this is me just reading my comics. But Corner Box Classics is, I have been reading everything week to week, and along the way, I did a whole thing. Like when I did this with the X-Men, where I read everything in continuity and kind of release order, I listened to time period specific music. I go in depth about this with my People with Issues episode with Mr. McGroovy over on his channel, if you've never seen that. Anyways, and so I decided, like, I was like, oh man, I've been finishing solid chunks of Fantastic Four and Captain America and Avengers and all sorts of stuff, and I was like, when I retire, I'm gonna read all my comics. And then I was like, am I gonna retire? And then the economy and a kid, like, I'm gonna be working until I die, so I might as well start reading my comics now. So that's what I do. I act as though, since I've always biked up to the comic book shop on New Comic Book Wednesday, this is just like, hey, if I had been biking up to the comic book shop on August 17th, 1982, these are the books that I would have picked up. I'm going to chat about them as though this was some type of new comic book day from 1982. So that's where we're at. So for those of you who have been waiting for the return of this, since this is the thing that I put on hold, because this one takes a little bit more. I'm not doing any research. I'm not, like, you're not getting graphics on the side over here. This is a low rent operation. You know what? Speaking of low rent operation, somebody a long time ago was like, man, if your room was lit differently, the production value would go up a notch. And I was like, yeah, but this is my house, and, like, I kind of like it being like, oh, string lights, because it's my house and it looks warm when you're in here. Probably not great, because I know there's like, somebody's like, oh, there's a light right there, and I don't know if I look a while. Anyways, I tossed some lights in here, and I was like, oh, but then they flicker, and I don't want to give any, like, they don't flicker in real life, but they flicker in, maybe it's just this one. This one looks dimmer than the others. Anyways, they flicker, and I don't want to cause an epileptic seizure for anyone. So let's just shut that down. Anyways, here we go. If I had pedaled up to my shop through my town, Peter Frampton kicking in my headphones, because it is August 17th, 1982, and he released an album that day, I would have picked up Defenders number 113. Moon Madness, released August 17th, 1982, written by J.M. DeMatteis, plot and pencils by Don David Perlin, inks by Michael Gustovich, letters by Shelley Lefferman, and colors by George Roussos. Okay, so this section of Defenders I have had and read before. And I read it during my X-Men read because when the original team disbands, I followed Beast into Amazing Adventures. Iceman, wherever he went, Warren, wherever he went. This pulled Champions into that pulled Champions into that run. And then eventually when the Champions disbanded, it ended in Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man and an annual of Incredible Hulk. And then they joined the Defenders. And so I was like, well, I got to get the Defenders that have Beast, Iceman, and Angel in it. And so I had the latter half of Defenders. Read it, enjoyed it, for its quirky madness. And then in the letters page where I found the relative who had the Barn comics, if you've seen that episode of the show, he bequeathed me a run of early Defenders, therefore completing the Defenders run. And let me tell you, I love big dumb comics and quirky fun comics, and Defenders is 100% that. It's quirky and weird, and it's out there. And Mood Madness is one of them. We got the Overmind here. Look at that. And I thought this double page spread was that was a pretty good looking one. And so basically, Kyle Richmond is president, but he is being controlled by the Overmind, and this draws in the Squadron Supreme. And Squadron Supreme is one of those cast of characters that no matter how many times I read their appearances, I just get more and more confused by them. I was going to make some type of, there's at some point where they start there's a character who uses a ring, and I was like, oh, it'd be cool. I get it. They're DC characters, and I enjoy every appearance I've ever read, but there's two versions of them. One is evil and one is not, and I'm always confused by which ones that I'm getting. And so, recently in these issues, there was a character named August Masters who they've been kind of dealing with, who is now been trapped on the other Earth where the Squadron Supreme is from. Again, this is the Defender stuff is just, it's great when I'm reading it. I enjoy the hell out of it when I'm reading it. And I love the cast of characters and the absurdity of it. But I don't necessarily, it doesn't stick with me the way other books do. And that is a problem. That's kind of a bum out. And so the team is basically figuring out, with the help of Hyperion, realizing that the Squadron Supreme and Kyle Richmond have been taken over by the Overmind. And they're concocting a plan here to basically go to the moon and take them out. And they're like, well, how do we get there? And then Valkyrie's like, oh, the Silver Surfer. And he's like, yeah, that's great, but I can't leave because of what Galactus did. I can't leave the space of Earth. I can no longer surf the cosmos. And then he's like, wait, holy shit. If we're in an alternate universe with the Squadron Supreme, then perhaps that affliction that Galactus put on me doesn't stand in this universe, and I'm safe to fly the cosmos. And so that's when Vision is like, I'm going with him because I can just coast with him throughout that. And so now we're kind of breaking the teams off as they go to take on the Overmind. And so basically this whole issue, which is, like I said, it's a ton of fun. It just does not stick with me the way that other things do. It's great superhero fun. It's wild. It's definitely out there. And I genuinely, like, I've read the Grunwald Squadron Supreme stuff, read that, I think, last summer, right before I started the channel. So I never talked about it. But it is set aside. I'm going to read it again for Cornerbox Classics, obviously, because I'm reading everything. And so it's fun. It's like I said, it is fun seeing these characters kind of go up against each other in the Defenders. I really enjoy the Hulk in the Defenders. I mean, I'm enjoying Hulk in, although this is one of the moments where, like, when I did the X-Men read, I had everything filed. I built this big spreadsheet that filed everything in a way that it made the most sense continuity-wise, which meant, like, I didn't read just whatever issue came out that week. I read chunks of stuff so that it flowed like it was actually happening in real life. And this is a little bit wonky the way that I'm doing it now for Cornerbox Classics, because it's good and bad. It's bad because you recognize that, like, stuff doesn't quite match up. Like, Hulk is kind of dumb Hulk in Defenders right now, but in Incredible Hulk, he's smart. He's, like, meshed with Banner perfectly. So that's a continuity thing that would be, like, would throw me off. And the other thing is like, Vision and Scarlet Witch right now are in their own miniseries doing their own thing, but then they're here. And so this is an interesting thing for me, because one of my complaints with modern comics is that there seems to be no flow of correct continuity, that just, it's a free-for-all. And realizing that it too was, for as great as everything is in the 80s, it was a little bit the same. And that's actually kind of comforting and makes me ease up on my criticism of new books in a way, because it's like, my nostalgia for my childhood comics isn't necessarily always correct in that regard. Like, one of my old man gripes about new comics actually kind of, like, happened in the olden days too. So again, it's just a good solid, like, punch up. And then towards the end, the really terrifying thing is that August Masters, realizing that, like, Kyle Richmond, the president, is the problem, shoots him in the head. And then another Kyle Richmond as Nightwing, because this is all alternate Earths and so on and so forth. Like, that's got to be a terrifying thing, watching yourself get, like, shot in the head. But the Overmind, because he was in Kyle's mind at the time of this, also dies. And basically, like, the Overmind turns into Null, the Living Darkness, which is just a terrifying, nightmare-inducing blob of tentacles and eyeballs. And that's why when I say, like, this is awesome, like, it's not like an issue where I'm like, I'm going to sit around the campfire with my buddies and be like, oh my God, the Overmind run on Defenders. There's other stuff that I like more. But that is to say, this is equally as absurd and as enjoyable and wonderful as it should be. Plus, that's a great cover, man. That's a really great cover. So yeah, usually Defenders is it's not as bad as Micronauts, but it's one of those books that I'm a little bit harder on. And I was like, I got to ease up on it a little bit. It's an enjoyable, fun ride, even if it's not, like, the top of my stack right now. Up next, Fantastic Four 248, Nightmare, released August 17th, 1982, written and drawn and inked by John Byrne, letters by Rick Parker, and colors by Glenys Wein. Len Wein's wife. They're not married. But back then, she was Glenys Wein. This opens up with this page of Triton swimming through a cave in the moon and finding this, like, glowing crystal that's sort of calling to him. He senses an intelligent hand in the shapings, and he's like, it's possible that I've discovered some guest artifact of a forgotten lunar civilization, and then he's like sort of like engulfed in light by the thing and lets out an arg. And then we cut to what appears to be Lockjaw arriving with the Fantastic Four, and there is a bunch of revelry happening because Crystal and Quicksilver's daughter has been born. So this is like a naming ceremony. So you get just a fantastic drawing of the Inhumans coming down. Confetti is falling. It's all fantastic. And they introduce the baby to the Fantastic Four. And Sue asks if they've decided on a name yet. And she's like, Crystal's, to commemorate our great exodus to the moon, we have chosen to call her Luna. Which I was like, that's great. And then as they're chatting, all of a sudden the moon gets like completely ripped out of orbit. So the Fantastic Four obviously go into action. And in this great panel, you see the moon being pulled into the ship. And like, if the moon is getting pulled into a ship, that's a big ship. And so the Fantastic Four get to work. Same with the Inhumans. Things are going haywire. The moon's starting to get pulled apart by these machines. They show up, and Reed's very much being Reed right now, and he's sort of explaining the alien ship and how like it had to be run by robots because there's no way like a humanoid could have done this. It's too big. And Ben at one point is like, "Isn't that a door? That looks like a door." And he's like, "It can't be a door. It's two." And sure enough, it's a door. And then out pops this huge alien-looking dude. And he starts running experiments on the world. He's like running his hands over the moon and it's crushing it. And like wiping out the city of Attilan. And Reed the entire time is like in the background as everyone else is like, what do? We got to attack this. And they're going about that. Reed is just like, this does not scientifically make any sense. Which is sort of adorable in the best way that I could possibly describe it. As he's like, because Johnny as they get pulled away, like Johnny is flying and like isn't losing his flame, and Reed's like, he would have flamed out by now and he couldn't have traveled this distance. Something about this is not making sense. And so Reed's brain's working overtime through this. And then like Black Bolt starts talking to the alien thing, and Reed is like, we would have, like, everything around us would have been decimated if Black Bolt had just done what he did. None of this is making sense. And so the little alien finally the big ass alien now notices them and pulls what amounts to be a can of bug spray off of his belt because he's treating them like they're little gnats. And he like flicks Johnny away when he flames on and goes up to him, which kills Johnny. And so now as the reader, you're like, well, you're either like a comic book veteran and you're like, okay, something's up. There's no way they'd kill off Johnny like that. Or if this was like your first, second, third issue of Fantastic Four in 1982, you're just like, holy shit, they just killed Johnny. Which can happen, you know. I was very early on in the Age of Apocalypse, and I was 100% convinced that Xavier was just dead. It's a weird time. There was no internet. It's a glorious time. There was no internet. But then we wouldn't be able to do this, and I'd just be doing this in front of my mirror. So the team, you know, they're attacking. Ben goes to swat him with this thing, and the alien basically just like launches him thousands of miles away. And then Sue dies. And Reed absolutely loses it. He becomes unhinged when he sees Sue die, which is one of those things where it's like, oh. And I mean, I get it, but I'm also like, hey, you watch Johnny and Ben die too. And so in his like anger, he snaps out of it, and they all are alive around him, and everyone starts to realize that they were all having a nightmare. And we only saw Reed's. Like, because the other, like, Sue immediately comes up to him and she's like, "Oh, I thought you were dead. I saw you blasted into atoms by Dr. Doom." And like, Medusa's like, "And I saw the death of my beloved Black Bolt." And so you start to realize they're all having their own, like, they all had their own nightmare experience. And then it cuts to the very last page, and it's Triton climbing out of the water near the crystal thing, realizing that he had defeated this thing that was in the crystals. And this was such a cool framing device, because Triton's like, "Oh, like, someone else was working with me." And it's obviously like when Reed snapped, like, it also helped Triton defeat this thing that was causing the nightmares for all of them. And so, like, if Triton hadn't swam up on that thing in the beginning, like, they would have just had a party for Luna instead of everyone having this nightmare. It was just a super interesting story. Like, I like that framing device of, like, no one, like, Reed, Sue, Johnny, Thing, the rest of the Inhumans, none of them know that, like, Triton's over here. And you don't even see it. Like, it just, he gets attacked by the thing, and then in the first page, and then the last page is him being like, "Good thing I kicked that thing's ass." And none of them are the wiser of how the other helped out. And I thought that was very cool. Like, just a super fun issue of Fantastic Four. The Byrne run, so far, of everything that I have read, I understand, I know that there would be nothing without the Stan and Jack stuff. But for me personally, I really, really, really love the Byrne era of Fantastic Four. I know I'm a Byrne slappy. It's fine. It is what it is. Tell me to kick rocks in the comments if you feel like it. I would have pedaled up there, and I would have grabbed Iron Man number 164, Deadly Blessing, released August 17th, 1982, written by Denny O'Neil, pencils by Luke McDonnell, inks by Steve Mitchell, letters by Rick Parker, and colors by Bob Sharon. Tony's been facing off against chess-themed characters, and so we're going to get a little more of that, because obviously on the cover they're like, "Beware the Bishop." And so you're either like, this dude's super religious, or this is chess-themed, which you're going to sort of figure it out. So the Bishop comes to break out the character that the knight that Tony faced off against in the last issue. So he breaks him out of prison, and the dude's like, "Oh, thanks for doing that." And he's like, "Oh, don't thank me yet." And then, basically drops him because he has let down his boss. Then it cuts to Tony being a super douche, and he rents out an entire restaurant to impress, I can't think of her name right, Indris is her name. So he's sort of doing that thing, and then he gets a call from his chief of security, who explains to him, like, "Hey, we got this basically, like, that somebody busted the night out, and Tony needs to go and kind of sort this out." So that all begins, and then you kind of get, like, the shadowy thing of the dude playing with the chess pieces, kind of laying the groundwork for what's going on against Tony. And they get invited out to Scotland, where they clearly run into what I assume would be one of the bad guys. In the interim, as they're flying there, Indris has become a stowaway on this. So it is Rhodey piloting, Tony on there, and then his new gal pal, who is, hanging out. So they get to this castle. Tony realizes this is bad news where we're at right now. My room's probably bugged, so I'll just put on a jammer in the helmet so I can don the Iron Man armor, bend some castle bars, and fly off to check it out. And so he does, and that's when he gets attacked by the Bishop, and he just gets his ass handed to him by the Bishop. And And so then as this whole battle is going on with Tony just like not doing well against this dude, you see the chess guy once again now talking to a character named the Rook. And you're like, oh, we're really in this chess motif here. And so Tony's fighting him. That is all going on. It is being screens of this for some odd reason are being pumped into the castle. Rhodey sees this. He obviously wants to help Iron Man. And everyone's like, oh, I didn't know Iron Man came along because they haven't put 2 and 2 together. And Rhodey goes to fight the Scottish dude and immediately gets pummeled by him. And he does the very comic book thing, which you shouldn't have mistaken my fat for flab. Very Harry Leland type of thing. And then Tony, as he's basically being held down underwater by the bishop, realizes that if he's not like directly in front of the guy, then this overwhelming sense of like defeatism doesn't bother him, which is sort of what's been going on. And I played chess occasionally here and there, but I'm not like a chess player. So I imagine that that's probably something, like my thought was, that's got to be something to do with the way a bishop moves on the chessboard, since we're going with that theme. So that's sort of where my head was at. And so then Tony realizes that part of the thing is in his hat. So he just like knocks the dude's hat off, defeats him. And that's that. And then he comes after the Scottish dude who's beat up Rhodey. And he's basically like, he's like, oh, you don't want to mess with me because they got your friends all tied up. And then this is the part where I was like, holy shit. So he's like, yeah, you defeated the bishop. He's like, but now it's the rook's turn. And Tony's like, where's the rook? And he's like, as you know in chess, the rook is the castle and you're in it. So I believe the next issue is going to be Tony versus the castles that he's in. So again, I know I say this all the time. It's my favorite way to describe comics, but this was once again just a fun book that I thoroughly enjoyed. If I had pedaled up to the shop in 1982 and dropped 60 cents for that, I would have been like, money well spent. Marvel Team Up number 123, Rivers of Blood, released August 17th, 1982, written by J.M. DeMatteis, pencils by Kerry Gamble, inks by Mike Esposito, letters by Diana Albers, and colors by Bob Sharon. I gotta get cruising. So last issue, Spider-Man versus Man thing. He winds up in the hospital. As he's in the hospital as Dr. Claire Temple. Obviously, we see her in Power Man and Iron Fist because she, I believe, has a thing with Luke Cage. A boy is brought in by his mother, and he's been stabbed. She left him home alone, like he was just, and another 13-year-old kid came in and like tried to rob them and stabbed him. And I got to admit, this is like, as I was reading this, I was like, fuck, don't let the kid die. And that stuff, man, I will tell you, this is like one of those super interesting things about being a fan of things before having a kid versus after having a kid. It's like my wife, obviously in the Fixing Up the Room, you know, there's a movie like Nook over there. And a show she used to love was this show called Criminal Minds. And as we were putting the DVDs and stuff back, the box sets and all that, we wound up giving the Criminal Minds to like a friend of ours. Because my wife was just like, I'm like, I could never watch the show because I'm just like, that shit is like, this is why I'm not like slasher, like crazy, weird Halloween stuff. I can sort of look, but when it's just like, here's a serial killer, I'm just like, that shit happened. I don't need to. That's not like my enjoyment. That's not, you know, like, whatever. It's sort of, and now with a kid, I got to admit some of that stuff, like, I'm like, oof, I can't watch that ever again. You know, there's a little bit of that with certain things where like before I would have been, like, hey, okay, I was watching some stuff and just been like, oh, whatever, but now, no. So I was reading this issue and I was like, do not kill this kid. I can't handle that. Anyway, so they rushed the kid, off to surgery. Spider-Man runs into Matt Murdock in the hallway. And you know, they start chatting it up, and they both recognize that they have some things going on. And as that's happening, this bad dude named Solar, who we've seen in previous issues of Marvel 2-in-1, number 57 to be exact, sort of is taken to task outside. Meanwhile, upstairs in the hospital, and this is why Matt Murdock was in the hospital, and what him and Spider-Man were catching up on, is there's a dude in there named Peepers who basically got a cancer diagnosis. He's like a mob guy, and he's now turning state's evidence because he realizes he doesn't want all this blood on his hands. And he has basically explained, hence the title, Rivers of Blood. This dude's like, I can't, you know, I've only been given 6 months to live, and like, I can't go. Which is like, it's sort of like, fuck you, dude. Like, who, you know, like, you know, you're a scumbag. So, kid, thankfully, we cut back to him in the hospital. He's on the rebound. And so Spider-Man is like, oh, let me show off for you, blah, blah, blah. Not realizing, like, hey, man, you're still pretty banged up. And, you know, that shouldn't be going on. So he leaves the room with the kid. His spider sense goes off because he can sense that there are some bad dudes that are going up there because they've got a hit on Peepers so that he can't turn this evidence. So a shootout ensues in the hospital. Spider-Man crashes through, as he should. And in the chaos of this, Solar busts through because he's got a problem with Peepers too. And so Murdock is like, oh, I've read about this dude. I kind of know what's going on. And Solar obviously has an issue with him. And while all this is going on, this is when I got really nervous. Oh, look, a Mark Zuler's variant. I don't even get that. To me, they're more annoying because it's just this thick, starred, hard, like, I don't like it. And I'm pretty sure that when I was younger, I'm pretty sure that I pulled a couple of them out of my comics because I just wasn't into it. You see that the kid, in his excitement to see this superhero battle in the hospital, busts out of his bed, and he's clearly popping his stitches. And this is where I was like, oh my God, they're going to kill him. They're going to kill him. And I was not okay with that. I don't know what the kid's doing upstairs. He's moving he's got a little chair up there that my great-great-grandfather made. And I think he's dragging her across the floor so he can get a better seat for Paw Patrol or something. Or I think he might be coloring. I got to get up there and color with him. We've got a whole thing going on. Anyways, so Solar and Spider-Man are fighting. This gives Murdock enough time to get out of there and do the old quick change. It's a fantastic move there. And Murdock quite smartly grabs a fire extinguisher and douses Solar, which was a pretty slick move, if I do say so myself. And so now Solar has busted out of there, but the kid is up there. And Peepers, to save his own skin in this, grabs the kid. And it's just like, you're a scumbag, man. You're an absolute scumbag. So Daredevil goes back to take care of Peepers while Spider-Man takes on Solar. Eventually, like, Daredevil is able to talk him down because he doesn't want more blood on his hands. And Spider-Man uses the old let me destroy a water tower above the building to kind of squash out Solar, webs him up, and then Peepers is just left to realize that he is an absolute scumbag and not long for this earth. And so I enjoyed the issue, and I enjoyed the issue mostly because I was happy that they didn't kill the kid. And the kid was just like, oh man, I'm bleeding out of my back. Better go get stitched up again. And that was that. So all's well that ends well. Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man, number 72, Waiting for Dr. Octopus, released August 17th, 1982, written by Bill Mantlo, pencils by Ed Hannigan, inks by L. Milgram, letters by James Novak, and colors by Glennis Wayne. This opens up, and when I opened this up last night and read this, I just thought that this panel right here, like with the, I just thought that was awesome. It made me think of Sal Buscema, and I was like, no, this is Ed Hannigan. Doc Ock steals a newspaper explaining that Doc Ock has escaped. And then we get, and this is going into, I love a good titles page where the title is like worked into. Days of Future Past is a really good one for that, the first issue of that. There's a really good X-Men Savage Land issue where like Into the Savage Land is like carved into the side of a mountain. And I just think that is a fantastic, and I don't think you can really get it, but like the credits are on billboards, and you get that thing that I love where it's like the lighter Spider-Man is seen kind of flipping around. And I did want to make this note that background inks are by Rick Magyar. I didn't have that written down in my notes because I just didn't. But I mean, even down to like edited by Tom DeFalco is written on the side of the truck. You know what I mean? Like colors by Glennis Wine. Like it's just, man, this is a really great, this is where I'm like, that, and they had it, this is what's so, there's a lot of new comics that I love. There's a lot of stuff that's done now that I love. I grew up in the I grew up in the 80s, but I mean, I was really collecting comics in the 90s. And like, there was a lot of stuff that kicked off when I was a kid getting into comics that was like digital colors and stuff like that, and things that they could do with computers that looked really fucking cool, right? But like, man, I see this and I'm just like, this is like, look at that title, look at everything that's going on. And I'm sure there's probably somebody who looks at that and is like, that's busy. It's not busy, it's beautiful. Like that, I would pay $4.99 for this book and not complain just because of the amount of time that I spent staring at this title page. Like the title page alone. It's so good. There's so much going on. And that's, I mean, to the point where they had to get an extra inker just to ink the backgrounds. And now they don't fucking draw backgrounds in comics. It's just a blank screen. Or, you know, whatever. I know. Get over it, Sean. Spidey swinging through the city, obviously, sees Moon Knight. They were really, really pushing Moon Knight at this point, from what I can tell. And I just, man, like, seriously, pick up. I do not do this to try to get anyone to like buy comics. I don't do the Wednesday videos to get anybody to buy. I'm not trying to sway anybody into buying something I like. Buy what you like. Read what you like. Talk about what you like about what you like. That's what I like to see. You could be talking about whatever, and as long as you're like into it, I'm into it. I get excited by other people being excited. It's going on here and ranting and raving does nothing for me. Talking about something that you love, explaining why you love it, even if I don't get it, I'm just like, look at that dude all fired up. Anyways, so look at that panel. You see Spidey swinging over there. This dude, who I'm assuming is Rick Magyar, like maybe he drew himself in there. Like, my all-time favorite movie is Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window. My favorite actor is Jimmy Stewart. I think that is a perfect film. I watch it all the time. And I love the setting of the building, the shots of the camera, the cinematography of it, the setup of that whole thing. And this is indicative of that. Like, I just sort of love this, like, you see through the window, you see Spidey, and then it kind of cuts into the building in another fantastic Hitchcock under, like, rope doesn't get the credit that it does, which is fantastic. Only 3 cuts in that film. It's great. You should watch it. You should definitely watch Rear Window, though. It's fantastic. It's such a good movie. Now I want to watch Rear Window. And you quickly realize that, like, oh man, we got like a Sinister Six going on in this weird apartment. And then slowly you start to realize, like, that's not actually Sandman. And these are kids. They're kids. at a party, at a costume party, where they're all dressed up. And this is just some dork who loves Doc Ock. So this guy that you saw in the beginning that I thought was Doc Ock was actually just this kid heading to his little party with all of his dork friends dressed up like supervillains. And the rest of those kids are like, we don't want to be hanging out here dressed as supervillains. We're going to go to this other kid's party. And so they leave, and he's all bummed out about it. And then I kind of felt bad for the kid. His name's Ollie. I was like, oh, that's kind of a bummer, as he like sobs in his bedroom with his TIE fighter and his poster of Doc Ock on the wall. But I'm like, what kind of a kid loves villains? And then I realized that my kid absolutely loves the Green Goblin in that Spidey show. Like, that's his favorite character. And I'm like, oh man, am I raising a supervillain? So then Ollie's parents come home and they're bummed. And again, there's some wonderful stylistic choices in here. Like, I love this panel of just the silhouettes. There's a bunch of, like, as he's creeping away with the arms, like the graveyard, it's like great stuff. And so, so basically, like, his parents go to the cops and they're like, our kid's running around town in a Doc Ock costume. Can you find him? And the cops are like, Jesus, lady, like, really, right now, as Doc Ock has just escaped from prison and all of a bunch of trigger-happy cops are searching for Doc Ock, your kid is running around in a Doc Ock costume. Right. All hands on deck. We got to find this kid. Pete gets home to his apartment. It has been ransacked, so he quickly whips out of the building and chases down the youths that have stolen his things. And one of the things that I absolutely love is a few issues earlier when he had gotten the apartment. If you looked at that panel, which I did because I love staring at old art and the detail in the panels, his apartment was just a mishmash of bullshit. Like, it really, really looked like Peter had just sort of dumpster dived to furnish this apartment, which is perfectly poetic in a wonderful way. And one of the things that stood out in the apartment is this wooden carved Indian that he had. And other people that have come over to Pete's apartment in subsequent issues have called out how odd this wooden Indian thing is. And so as the kids are running away, they're like, one of the kids is like holding this huge wooden Indian. And he's like, hey guys, wait up. And they're like, run faster, jerk. It's not our fault you snatched that guy's wooden Indian. And then another kid is like, yeah, this sucks. Most of the stuff in that place was junk anyway. And so Pete obviously catches up to him, gets bummed out about this. And then hears some craziness going on, realizes that he needs to thwip away and be Spider-Man somewhere else where some serious stuff is happening. And he leaves them all webbed up to the wooden Indian, which I just, like, it's stupid. Some people would probably just breeze right past this, but just having clocked that thing in Pete's apartment, recognizing that other characters, it's just that is a simple, like, nod to anyone who's been paying attention, that I just think, like, this was, as much as I enjoyed the Fantastic Four, as much as that has everything in it that should be my favorite book of the week, this, hands down, this Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man issue, hands down, best book of the week for me. So Pete flips off, heads out. There's been a grocery store that has been ransacked, and one of the cops is like, it had to have been a kid, because the only thing that, there's no money missing. The only thing that's missing is candy and comics. And I was like, I'm a 45-year-old man, and if I ransacked a grocery store, it'd probably be for comics and candy too. And so the grocer's like, it ain't no kid, man. It was Doc Ock. And they're like, it's not Doc Ock. We can assure you it's not Doc Ock. So Pete eventually finds this kid, but he thinks that it's Doc Ock. And so this dude winds up busting into a toy store. And so I'm sure Pete is like, and just again, look at that panel. Like the shadow of Doc Ock. It's so good. This whole book was a feast for the eyes, for sure. So here he is stealing a ROM toy. And there's a night security guard at this toy store, and the kid accidentally knocks him unconscious. And he's like, this draws Spider-Man in. They start fighting. And it is like, it's just a fun, like, it's great art, and it's just them fighting through a toy store. And then they're fighting underwater. And that's when Pete realizes, like, oh, holy crap, this is a kid. And I love this panel of him, like, realizing, like, oh my God, if I take this kid down, like, imagine the headlines that the Bugle would run for this. So he winds up, like, letting the kid go, which is just great. And earlier, when he had busted the kids that were going through his apartment, he had found a bunch of money on the kids. And was like, this isn't money from my house. You guys have obviously burgled other people, but he doesn't know who they burgled. So he winds up leaving the money for the cops to find to pay for the damages to the toy store, which, like, sucks for the people that the money was stolen from. But it's still, like, just a little funny thing. So then it cuts back to the kid's parents' house. He's back in his room, and he has put a Spider-Man poster up because he's changed his ways, and now he's all about Spider-Man. And the great thing is there's these 3 panels where, like, Doc Ock, which now that I look at it, matches the Doc Ock from the front. So maybe it was Doc Ock on the first page. But anyways, I digress. Doc Ock gets all pissed off because he sees all these torn up, like, posters and memorabilia of Doc Ock. And then we cut to the final page, which is Deb Whitman talking to her therapist, and she is basically like, I'm going crazy because either Peter Parker is Spider-Man or I'm helplessly insane. And so we're like, oh crap. So this, hands down, favorite issue of the week. This was an absolute blast. Great cover. Pete doesn't actually fight Dr. Octopus, just a kid named Ollie. And it was a ton of fun. Great art, tons of stuff to look at. Can't say enough good things about that issue. Final book of the week. Thor Annual number 10, A Time to Die, released August 17th, 1982. Written by Alan Zelenitz, with a plot by Mark Grunwald, pencils by Bob Hall, inks by, holy smokes, Rick Bryant, Joseph Rubinstein, Andy Mushansky, Alan Gordon, and Kevin Zuban. That's a lot of inkers. Letters by Rick Parker, and colors by George Roussos. It's hard to follow up Peter Parker, Spectacular Spider-Man, number 72. So this opens up with the creation of the Earth, and the creation of the Elder Gods. Kind of this whole thing going on, and the birth of a god named Atum, A-T-U-M, not to be confused with the rock opera made by the Smashing Pumpkins. And so this dude, this Atom dude, eventually becomes the Demogorg and starts, like, eating gods, and he's a god destroyer and winds up fucking off into the sun. And then the Asgardian gods are brought in, so this just gives us a history of these older gods. Then we see Asgard. They're having a funeral for Nana, Balder's girlfriend, who died in a previous issue. It is a huge bum out. Balder is devastated. And then Thor brings down the thunder, and there's a funeral pyre, which I have it in writing that is exactly what my wife is going to do with all my comics. She's going to push a boat into a lake, shoot an arrow, and that's the end of Sean. My comics are going with me, Hank. You're on your own. Yeah. So she then gets lifted into Valhalla, which I got to admit, if I was like at a funeral, and like all of a sudden what a trip to just see a Pegasus come down with some woman riding it. grab the body, lift out the soul, and head out and be like, hey, drinks in the halls of Valhalla. I don't think a funeral would be that sad if I actually saw the person lifted into heaven. That's just me, though. Then there's a pretty great double-page spread of Hela arguing with the rest of some gods, Pluto and Mephisto's there, and they basically are having this like, hey, we got to eventually team up and like put our might together and take down some stuff, because basically like a couple of the gods are like, hey, like our realms aren't populated by people because people don't believe in us anymore, so eventually we're just going to fade away, and so we need to team up and basically like make it known that we're still here. It's a great premise for this. So they join forces, but what winds up happening is they accidentally summon the Demogorg, who's like, I love to eat gods. And so he immediately eats Seth. That's a bum out. And it is gross. And I'm trying to find where it was. Yeah. And then, yeah, so the Demogorg then swallows the powerful god of Egypt through a moist, pulsing orifice in its leathery palm. And I was like, oof, I needed a shower after reading that panel. Moist, pulsing orifice. All right, Alan Senelitz, you freak. So then it's just the gods taking on the Demogorg as he tears through them, which is tons of fun. And then Odin realizes that this is going on. He's like trouncing through the woods and suddenly sees a vision of the God Eater, and so he sends Thor off with a bunch of other cool looking gods that I do not remember the name of, but they were all given descriptions and they all appeared to be very cool gods. And I do find it ironic that I don't remember their names, because the whole story is set off by a couple of the other gods being like, humans don't know us anymore, and it's causing some havoc. And here I am. I just read the comic earlier today, and I couldn't tell you a single one of their names. That's the level of research over here at BaseMint Comics. So, you know, it is legitimately just these gods going up against the God Eater, and it is tons of fun, and they're all getting defeated. And so then Thor's like, you know what? I just got to dive in, and I can defeat him from the inside, which I'm like, maybe? But that's when you get, where is it? There it is. That's where you get buck-ass nude Thor just inside this God Eater, punching him from the inside. And he does, with the help of the others on the inside, eventually defeat him. And this reunites Hela with Thor and Odin. And so that is, I imagine, what you're getting out of this issue, is that reunion. So, like, I had a good time with it. I thought, you know, I mean, worth it just for the couple lines of dialogue. But what really put this one over the top for me, not Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man number 72 over the top, but I love me a good map. And that has a great map of the realms. And what's great is then you flip the page and they're like, oh, we can't really explain all of that. So here is this just block of tiny phone book text that you get to read that explains everything about that map. Like, you get to know about the Flaming Chasm. Yeah. Also known as the Molten Chasm. A long crack in the earth filled with flame that separates the land of Skomheim and the home of Hardell the Healer from the rest of the world. $1. And you get nude Thor going into the God Eater's moist orifice to fight him from the inside. And you get a map of Asgard. That was worth it. So, those are the books that I would have picked up on August 17th, 1982. And they were all great. Even Defenders. So the tea is low. I am getting weird. And I got to go upstairs and color. It's going to be a great night. I will be back on Wednesday with a ride up to the comic book store to pick up our new books. And hopefully everything's back on a pretty good schedule from here. There's still some things that need to be done to the house to get it all 100% back in shape, but so far so good. So, thanks for hanging out for Cornerbox Classics this week, and I will be back on Wednesday. Thanks for taking this ride with us. Enjoy your comics. Bye.